Depending where you live, droughts and other issues can cause inflated hay prices or shortage of forage in some seasons. But here are a bunch of creative feeds that can help you get through the tough times, and even things you can grow to prepare for tough times. Here are the top 10 alternatives to hay and feed when supply is scarce. And you could just find a few of them to be cheaper and so much healthier for your flock that you might not want to go back. Number 1. Beet Pulp. Beet pulp is the dry byproduct that comes from processing sugar beets. And despite the word sugar, it's actually pretty low in sugar, but it sure packs a punch in protein. You can count on at least 10% protein in the spent product, and it even has a little phosphorus and calcium to spare. On its own, it won't be enough to sustain an animal from a nutritional standpoint, but it is a great way to supplement and increase your feed. It's suitable for horses, goats, and very good for dairy cows. And if your horses are on the picky side, you can always add molasses to make it more palatable. Most livestock will happily eat it dry and mixed in with other feed, but you'll need to give it a good soak before horses will eat it. Number 2. Grain straw. Grain straw is a broad term. Any grain after processing, wheat, barley, oats, and even rice, leaves behind an enormous amount of empty stalks. These unusable stalks cause quite a headache for factories to get rid of. Disposing of them can get expensive when you take fuel costs into account. Some grain processing facilities even have started compressing them into single-use plates for restaurants to serve as a biodegradable option for dinnerware in an attempt to get rid of the excess material while still making a small profit from it. Grain stalks are rarely used for animal fodder because they are so low in nutrients on their own, but they are perfectly edible for livestock, making them ideal for bulking up your dwindling food storage. Some farms even compress their otherwise wasted stalks into ready-to-use pellets, or they chip them down and sell them in bags, or they don't bother processing them at all and are willing to give it away for free just to get it off their hands. Number 3. Citrus pulp. Again, we look at a product that farms and processing plants would otherwise have wasted. But unlike grain straw, the citrus pulp is very nutritionally dense, and it offers the natural antibacterial and antifungal properties the fruits produce to protect themselves right back to your animals. It's a good idea to seek it out anyway, just as additional supplementation, even if you aren't looking to bulk up where there are shortages. They are calorically dense and contain plenty of flavonoids, limonoids, coumarins, and a wide variety of vitamins and minerals. Livestock, especially horses, might not be able to digest certain fruits, so keep the species of animals you're feeding in mind and do your research before procuring your fruit pulp. Number 4. Bran. Another byproduct of factory and farm production on our list is bran, or you might know it as millrun. It's the material that's left over from flour production. Bran is very commonly sold at feed stores and sometimes straight from the factory where the flour is produced. It's one of the cheapest fodder options that you'll find in the store. It's high in fiber and energy, but it doesn't offer much more nutrition than that. It's a cheap option for ruminant animals that need to keep their jaws constantly moving. Number 5. Almond hulls. Almond hulls should be on every farmer and livestock owner's list of feed options. The outer shells of almonds are discarded after the almond nut is extracted, and these shells are usually just used as mulch. But in reality, it's the best alternative to alfalfa that you could ask for. From a nutritional standpoint, it's on par with average-grade alfalfa, and it's higher in natural oils, making it one of the best supplements for milking cows and goats. You can safely substitute with almond hulls by as much as half of your feed. So, if you have almond factories and farms in your area, you can't let this nutritionally dense feed pass you by. Number 6. Sunflowers. Sunflowers might just be the most overlooked substitute on our list. It's high in protein, oils, fiber, and lignin. And the entire plant is edible, from flower to root. To store for future use, the whole plant can be hung up to dry. After all of the moisture is gone from the plant, it is chipped or shredded. Goats and pigs won't mind working down complete stalks and flower heads. Heck, they'll even munch on the hard roots. But your cows, sheep, and chickens would like it a little better if it was worked down. You can grow a lot in a small space. They aren't finicky about soil and watering conditions, and they can store for years if they are dried thoroughly. One seed head carries more than 500 seeds, so you can have a fresh supply at hand throughout the year if you live in a region where it doesn't get cold enough to snow. Number 7. Amaranth. Amaranth is the forgotten grain of the Americas. It was once such a staple that European colonists sought to eradicate it in an attempt to cripple the native populations. Besides the fact that it isn't used nearly enough for human consumption, it is a fantastic food source for animals. It has the highest density of protein outside of legumes, and their seed heads carry some of the highest yields of all grains. You can find amaranth growing wild on every continent except Australia and Antarctica, and given its incredible yield and nutritional density, you might want to consider just growing it instead of seeking it out in nature. A small patch in your backyard can greatly cut down on your feed costs. If you want to be extra economical, you can work the roots, stems, and leaves down to smaller chunks too. They are all edible and contain enough oomph to keep your animals healthy. Number 8. Breweries. Stopping in at your local brewery to feed your animals might not have been at the top of your list when you were thinking of ways to feed your animals, but let's assure you, you're missing out on a great opportunity to get your hands on nutritionally dense and cheap food for your flock. Every grain used in beer production is perfectly edible. Hops, barley, rice, corn, and wheat all come out of the production process as a wet product that has been stripped of its sugars and carbohydrates. But the protein, fiber, and even a little fat is still very much present in the pulp. Breweries are selling their used grains for pennies and dimes, and some smaller enterprises are happy to give them away for free to save them the disposal costs. Maybe it's time to head out, have a cold one, and offer to take some of those grains off their hands. Number 9. Found in nature. The options right outside of your door are endless. If you can't allow your animals to graze freely, this will require some good old-fashioned elbow grease. But there are plenty of trees and low-growing varieties that can feed your animals so well that you might no longer need to rely solely on paid-for feed. Let's focus on the trees and bushes first. Oak, willow, poplar, pigeon pea, and every edible berry variety can be harvested and saved for later in the season. You'll only need to cut down the younger branches and hang them out to dry. The dried leaves and fruits are then stripped off and added to your feed bags, or you can just lay them down whole for your animals to feed on. You can harvest well after the first snow falls before trees go into full hibernation, so they'll supply you with fresh greenery well into the cold season for much longer than you'd think. The obvious precautions should be taken to forage responsibly. Leave enough of the plant behind to bounce back for many more years. All of these varieties grow so prominently that you really don't have to harvest from just one tree alone. So look into what grows in your area. If you're lucky, you can add a few nut and fruiting trees to the mix too. But there is also the low-growing and sometimes invasive species that often get overlooked. Kudzu is a menace to get rid of, and it can choke out acres of trees at a time. You'll be doing nature a favor by taking some of them out of the ground. And kudzu is so nutritionally dense that it's almost inconceivable that it isn't utilized in place of feed more often. It has a high crude protein content and is made up of 60% digestible material. Ideally, pigs and goats should be penned off to clear out patches of kudzu, since they can eat the plants right down to the roots. But the vines can be collected and fed to animals both in their fresh and dried forms. Comfrey is another high-value crop that's growing just about everywhere, and it's such a good source of extra nutrients that you might want to consider keeping it at hand anyway. It's a great boost for your milking animals, and comfrey has enormous medicinal benefits for humans too. There's no reason this little weed shouldn't be a staple in your barn and in your pantry. Number 10. What you can grow yourself. You don't need an unlimited amount of space at your disposal to grow enough food to make a big dent in your budget. A small patch can go a long way if you're choosing the right crop. Alfalfa and comfrey can thrive with very little water and care. Both of them bounce back even if you trim them down to the ground, and they aren't too picky about soil conditions. Sweet potato vines and nasturtium flowers are edible for humans and most grazing animals. Pigs and goats will happily eat the sweet potatoes too. And growing corn for your own use will leave you with plenty of husks and stalks that can be repurposed into fodder. Corn can be a struggle to shred by hand when it's been dried, but sending it through a wood chipper or grinder will do the job just fine. In our opinion, there are so many options at our disposal that relying on feed bought at stores seems not only unnecessary, but incredibly expensive. What are you doing to cut down on costs? And do you know of any natural feeding options growing out in the wild that we missed? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps keep the lights on over here. Until next time, keep growing, keep producing, and never stop learning about your land and how to take care of it for the next generation.